Hey everybody, this is Paul, and I'm here with Tim George, and we are in an experimental plot. About 6 months ago, we got into collaborating with Dragon Fruit, and here we are now. So, Tim, tell us how and why you got into Dragon Fruit to begin with.
Well, my oddly enough, my first experience with dragon fruit was in 2007. I was studying abroad in Beijing, China, and I had some of the white, probably one of those Vietnamese whites.
And then Dad is probably.
And it was on this fruit platter, and I guess it wasn't a very ripe piece of fruit or something because somehow I had made my way over to a table with some Chinese VIPs. And I was drinking their booze and eating the fruit off their table, and all that was left was dragon fruit. So these guys basically talked me into finishing off a fifth of Johnny Walker Black mixed with black tea, which, if you're already there, is a pretty tasty mix. But I realized I needed to kind of catch up on my liquor, so I took about 6 of these giant pieces and just chowed them down. And it wasn't a super flavorful piece of fruit. I was like, this dragon fruit stuff, I could leave it, I could take it.
So it was a bad first experience.
Wasn't a great first experience. There's a rumor out there that I may have ended up throwing all of it up. I can't confirm that rumor. But I would say it's probably not the most attractive pile of something on the floor, if that ever did happen. A lot of black seeds on a white background. So after that I was a little bit resistant to trying dragon fruit again because bad association and bad memory. And then after I got married, 2011, I moved in to my in-laws' house for a while to do the whole traditional Vietnamese thing. My wife is Vietnamese. So we moved in with her parents for a while, and there was some family pressure to do that. We were also trying to get established in Southern California at the time, and housing prices were going back up and the whole thing. But her dad has been a hobbyist dragon fruit grower for years. He's got some 15-year-old plants in his yard, probably some variation of Undatus or Vietnamese white or something. But he's got 2 varieties of white self-fertile and 1 variety of red self-fertile. And they were really good. I mean, these days I'm not a big fan of whites, except for the Bruni.
Yeah, Bruni's good.
Yeah. But it was just it was a different world. It took me probably a year and a half to actually try one. I was like, I've been down that road. I don't need to do it. And my wife's like, no, these are good. And I was like, nah, I'm good.
So you weren't resistant to trying it?
I was resistant to trying it again. And it was a bad experience. And it wasn't really good fruit the first time I tried it. But man, those fruits he grows are good. And they're high sugar. They taste good. They're flavorful. His red ones especially are really full-bodied, kind of a complex flavor. And
so you learned they have a potential.
Well,
commercial.
Yeah, and I learned the most important thing I learned was there's a bunch of little houses in the Garden Grove area where people are just growing in their front yard, and these guys are getting $8 a pound for them at the time. Wow. So grocery stores were selling them for $9 or $10, and so these little house farmers were selling them probably for at least half of that. Mm-hmm. So I was like, man, this is a lot of as a citrus farmer. If you could sell your navels for $1 a pound, you're doing great. I got some money this year. And so I was just thinking, I was doing the math, and I'm like, I think this might be something that's profitable. I wonder if I'd have to be in Southern California or if we could grow these somewhere else. So I'd say 2 years ago, it's been 2 years now, I came to work with my dad, sort of the aftermath of the COVID thing. I thought a lot about what was important to me. And I was working in technology at the time. I was doing software design, user experience stuff. And then when the COVID hit, I eventually got laid off, and I was looking for new work, and I had interviewed a couple places, and I was doing consulting work, and I was thinking about building out a consulting career or go back in and try to work at a big company. And I was just my dad had called me, and he's like, hey, I'm building up a greenhouse and I could use some help with it. Would you like to come work while you're looking for work? And I told him, I said, no, I wouldn't like to come work while I'm looking for work. But if you want to work together, if you want me to build that, I'll come work for you. And my intention is we're going to find some business, something that we're going to do together. And we're going to start a business that starts with me and you, and then is going to go to my kids later, and then their kids later. Yeah. So I wanted to work to me, what was important was I don't want to force my kids into anything. I think all the best family business models have one thing in common, which is they don't force the next generation to take it over. It's only the ones that want to come back. But they do force their kids to go out and do something else first. And so I wanted to build an intergenerational model that was a product of me having left and gotten my own skill set and bring that back to dad. And then I want my kids to go out and do their own thing and be successful in some way. And then after they're done with that, they're going to be welcome to come back and join the family business. But I'd like them to have an opportunity to get out and do their own thing first. So then it was, what is it going to do? Are we going to try to expand our sumo growing operation? Are we going to try to start a farm management company? I looked at buying a fabrication shop. There's a local guy down here. One of my best friends growing up, his dad runs a tank company where they make diesel tanks and gasoline tanks. So I considered maybe trying to get some financing and buy that, but just something that we could work on together as a project that would be around later on for my kids.
Yeah.
And in that process, we noticed there's actually, I wouldn't be the first dragon fruit grower in this area. There's another guy down the street from us that's got about 3 acres in tunnels. And he's doing another 10-acre planting right now. So
he's having success so far.
He's having success, yeah, and he's growing conventionally. He's not growing organically. And he, compared to citrus, it still sells for more. Sells for more.
Really?
I think I think his plants are 3 years old now, and he says he feels like if he had 8 acres and just work on it himself, it'd be a lot less work than other farming operations he has all over the valley, but he'd make more money.
Really? So he sees potential in it. He sees
potential in it, yeah. We spent a day with him, my dad and I.
And then I can you said, right?
Yeah, I could actually introduce you to him. His name's Albert Carranza. Really solid guy. We had a really good conversation. So we've been back and forth in contact a little bit. He's growing mostly physical graffiti and American Beauty.
Which are 2 commercial potential crops.
Yeah. And then he's got all these, he has like 60 varieties of stuff that he probably doesn't know what they are anymore just because none of them were successful. And of course the obligatory El Grullo, everybody seems to have that now.
Yeah, they never die.
But it's funny though, all around the outside, he's got Lisa's all around the outside of his property because it's extra thorny.
Built-in fence.
Yeah, built-in fence. This plant was purchased from not the real Cal Poly, the one in Pomona. Cal Poly Pomona.
Yeah.
It was purchased from Cal Poly Pomona in May as an 8-inch long cutting.
So you bought 8-inch cuttings from
the website? I bought 8-inch cuttings from the website, yeah,
so
and then I drove down and picked them up.
6 feet or more, taller than me, was an 8-inch cutting.
Yeah, in May of this year. So I think May 12th was the day I went down there.
And when did you plant it in this mound? Because this is one of your methods here. So you're doing a mound style.
I've got it written down there. It says 8/28/22. And that was, I drew black marks on these, and they're just kind of hard to find in some spots. Yeah, it's really faint. So when I planted this in, so August, right? August 28th, it was this tall. So I've gotten this much growth, and these shoots out since August.
Okay. And you're still continuing to get lots of new growth in this setup during the winter. I mean, it's the middle of December here, the end of December, and look at this. You can see all the growth here, and we're actually pruning off quite a bit.
So yeah, why don't you show me, Paul? Earlier we were talking about how you would deal with this once it's gotten to the top. I've got one node coming out over here.
Okay.
So that's got a top node.
So I would leave that. I would probably leave this one. And in this case, honestly, I would probably pull this one, leave this one, and alternate them. So keep that, pull this, and you're best off kind of alternating, so that way you get more airflow into here, because this is just too many new branches.
Yeah, so take this one
so
off,
I take that,
this one off.
Yep, and I think that's better if you're really trying to channel the energy.
Now, would you take another one off down here so I get, or you think we're high enough that I should?
I would probably leave that one, but it doesn't matter, to be honest with you. But I would leave it just because I think it would be nice to try to channel its energy in that direction. Well, explain. You had some problems with fungal issues, correct?
So this is actually just like your normal cactus rust or CVX or whatever that is. But if you go to the, well, that fly was slow. If you go to the next one over, I think it's a Zamorano or a Flora. You can see these little black areas These were all like really active fungal growths.
Right down in here.
And what had happened was I closed off the greenhouse completely. There was no ventilation, except for maybe out the doors on the ends. And then we were running misters because it was still getting 105 in here in the daytime.
Okay.
So when we were running misters, what was happening is it got super humid in here, which was kind of still doing okay. I was getting a little bit more of the like red spots on things. Like
A little bit more
here.
cactus rust.
Yeah. So when it got humid, that's when the sort of virusy stuff started showing up.
And that was a lot of this black.
Well, that didn't know. It was actually, it wasn't until it got cold.
That's what happened.
And once it got cold, all this mold grew. So I called my pest control advisor, who works for us for citrus, and I said, you know, here's this mold. It's growing out like crazy. I don't want it on my plants. What can I do? And he gave me a product called Oxidate. And it's more or less, if you look at the active ingredient, it's more or less like a 97 USP hydrogen peroxide.
So it's basically peroxide.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I diluted that one to 100.
Okay.
No, I think it might have been like a quart to 100 gallons. Like
So it was very dilute.
Very dilute. And then I put it in a backpack sprayer, and this whole thing, it took me probably like 6 gallons total for this whole thing. But I just soaked those things up and down, and I got every piece. And by the next day, it was all black.
It turned black like this on my finger.
Yeah, just like
I
that.
pulled off a piece.
I think I might have some regrowing because it's gotten cold again.
Yeah, I've seen some
it looks
active.
like a little fuzzy right here. That looks active. It's actually dying off some. So
But
I
it's
wonder
growing
if
on the sap, right?
Yeah,
It's
it
actually on
goes,
the sap off of the nodes.
I never noticed this when they were outside in the heat.
Mm-hmm.
I never noticed that sap bubble coming out ever at all. So
Okay.
I'm wondering if that has to do with humidity, because where it's more humid and where I'm giving it a little bit more water once I got them planted.
And the colder weather, right? So it's kind of that.
Well,
fact
no,
of the cold.
it was as soon as I planted them in here that I started seeing sap, and I thought there was a pest because we have walnut husk flies in here. And I didn't see it until after I started seeing walnut husk flies in here.
So you planted them in the soil, you started watering them, you noticed more sap.
More sap, yeah. And so I thought what was happening is that walnut husk fly is a sucking bug. It's got a piercing part.
Okay.
So I thought maybe it was eating in here and then opening that up, and then the sap was coming out. So it was actually just yesterday that you told me the sap was okay that I stopped worrying about it. I've been both worrying about it. And, you know, my father is just a really thorough farmer. So his thing is like, if there's a problem, we got to fix it today. And that's why how we saved these from this mold here is we found it, we got the Oxidate the next day, and we sprayed it right away.
And having the ventilation. Because now that you have ventilation, you can see, look at how healthy this growth is. I mean, it's beautiful growth, especially this time of year. If you're growing outdoors, you're not going to see this in Southern California. So the growth of these new branches, I mean, look at them all. Every branch you see is just really, really healthy. Look at this growth.
Well, and we should probably...
And we still have that mold, though. So that's the only thing, but it's not active.
But it's not active anymore.
And you only sprayed it once?
One spray, yeah.
One spray. So see,
one spray, and then
mold.
got the fans installed. Now this one got some bad rust on it. I was worried for a minute.
Yeah, it's turning black though. When it's black, that's a good sign. That means it's not active. When it's really rusty color, that's a bad sign.
Well, what I learned at the Pattaya Festival, if that's to be trusted, which I would assume it is,
I hope so.
is with a lot of these diseases, you just have to outgrow them.
Yep.
You got to keep your plants healthy enough and keep them on enough nutrition.
Yep.
And so we're not watering a ton right now just because there hasn't been any sun and it hasn't been warming up in here at all.
Mm-hmm.
But we've started actually injecting like your Miller 20-20-20 fertilizer. So we don't know exactly how we're going to fertilize them and put the regimen on yet. There's a couple papers I've looked at, one from India, one from Israel, and I think one from Vietnam, that talk about what time of year to put on what amounts of fertilizer in what ratios. Mm-hmm. And so I want to use that as a basis point, like a jumping off point. And then I'll probably start with like a third of that, but put it in liquid fertilizers with the water.
Okay.
So then what I'll do is I'll be injecting at a ratio or mixing it in my tank, and then you know, when our water tank turns on, there's actually an agitator in there. Okay. So I can mix in advance, and then it'll just deliver out the water with the pre-mixed nutrients in it.
Now, have you seen the UC article on the macro and micronutrients? They did do an experiment.
No, I
so
haven't.
I'll put the link. The link's in the description below, and I'll send it to you as well. So that will
I can't wait to read that. Yeah. That's going to be really good. I've been looking for the actual
NPK at different times.
Yeah, well, that's the one out of Israel came up, or the one out of India came up with. But theirs was for the impact on fruiting, and the most production of fruit and the best size of fruit. I think there's a lot of space to learn not only what fertilizers these things want, but when they want them. And you'll find just in general with plants, their physiological needs differ based on season and based on what the plant's releasing different hormones at different times of the year. And those hormones code what nutrients it wants to uptake. And so if you give the plant exactly the ratios of things it wants to uptake, it's not having to be selective about what it's uptaking. And it's not going to uptake too much of something to the detriment of something else. Like in our citrus trees, we actually, this last year, us and then the company that my dad works for has been pulling a leaf sample every year or every month of the entire year, so we can build a graph of if we go out in the field and look at what looks like the healthiest looking block over the time, and then we match that to what was the nutrients in there. So then we have a target for what to test the biomass to every time of the year. And we know in March, I want my nitrogen to be at a 4.4, and in April, I want it to be at a 4.2, and in May, I want it to be at a 3, and then we can map the levels, the percentages of biomass that is nitrogen, potassium, and then it even does micronutrients as well.
So basically formulate a perfect, optimal conditions for the plant to do its best.
Well, but also a way for you to get a litmus test and find a problem before it happens. Okay. Because something may look good, but it may have used up all its nitrogen reserves, and it's not going to be able to throw good buds this year. So you might have a beautiful, long, leggy vegetative growth, and then you find that you just used up all your nitrogen, and there's not more available in the soil, and the plant doesn't have reserves anymore because it just spent it all on this brand new expensive leg extension. It looks really pretty, but now it's not going to be fruitful this year. And so we want to sort of build our baselines. If I were to take a piece of new growth and a piece of old mature growth, and I were to sample those, which one's going to have more nutrients? Which one's going to have more nitrogen in it? I don't know any of that yet, but we want to build up a baseline of that over time, and use that baseline to then actively be messing with our fertigation and figure out what exactly does this plant need, and more importantly, when does it need it.
Okay. So as we go down here, you have quite a few more plants that you have been rooting and starting to grow. What are your plans with dragon fruit for 2023? What do you think you're going to do in this beautiful setup?
So I'm debating. I don't know. You're going to have to advise me, as that's your role in our relationship. You're the guy who knows things, and I'm the guy who asks things.
Well, you teach me a lot too, so we'll be a collaboration.
I've got a few more spots because I knew that you had some more varieties for me to purchase so that we could try out some stuff. So there's a few more spots I need to fill with experiments. Right now, I believe I have 35 varieties planted in here. These are not all the same variety. What I want to know is which of these are going to fruit here, and which of these are going to be highly productive here, and which of these, I'm always asking the question as a farmer. I'm always asking the question, what's going to come the earliest and what's going to come the latest? When can I be in the market when somebody else isn't in the market? You have your physical graffitis and your American beauties, and they're great and they're wonderful, and everybody and their mom grows them. And so you could have the best fruit in the world, but if everybody has the best fruit in the world, it's worth nothing. Yep. And not just the home growers, because you're never going to have all the people that want it grow it at home, right? Yes. There's enough people that aren't going to do that. But if your farm and your sister's farm and some big grower in Southern California's farm are all bringing your fruit off at the exact same time, it's supply and demand, immediately the same amount of fruit of the same quality is worth a ton less just because there's not enough demand for all that fruit. Now,
and that's probably a big problem with commercial dragon fruit, is that we have this huge mega bloom and we have all this fruit ripe at the same time.
Well, and since all your growers are in the same area, they all have the same mega bloom the one year, and they all have the same retarded bloom the other year. Yeah. And so, when nobody has fruit, it's expensive. And when everybody has fruit, it's cheap. And so if you don't have much fruit, but it's more expensive, there's a benefit to that, in that you get to make a little bit of money off of that. But you're maybe not making any more money than if you had a bunch of fruit that was cheaper.
Yeah.
And maybe you're making a lot less because you don't have much fruit. So I'm keeping an eye towards diversifying so that if I've got one variety that's not good this year, maybe another one is. Mm-hmm. But I also want to be a little bit, is there something different about my climate? Is there something different about my area? Or do I need to look at a different variety than other people so that I can supplement the holes that exist in today's market?
Mm-hmm. So you want to fill the gaps when there's a great demand for dragon fruit. You want to have that supply on an off season or off time compared to other farms.
But in addition to that, I also want to see all farmers be successful. To me, I look at somebody who's willing to pour their life into farming. That's a special breed of person. And this is maybe different than other people, I really like to eat food. I enjoy having nutrition in my body that I can eat that makes me grow and be healthy. And I know maybe everybody doesn't feel that way, but I
hope most
that way a lot. Yeah. So to me, there's a special place in my heart for farmers. So I want to see people willing to do that hard work be successful. So I think there's some space in the dragon fruit industry for growers to work with each other as opposed to working against each other.
So more of a co-op instead of a competition.
Yeah, and the bottom line is there's nowhere near enough dragon fruit for the potential market for the dragon fruit right now. But if as a set of growers we communicate to the market, when I have this stuff, I'm going to dump it, then everybody who buys dragon fruit is only going to buy it when you're dumping it. Yep. And nobody's going to care about the process that goes into making this stuff good. You could have dragon fruit for 99 cents a pound, and you could have dragon fruit for $8 a pound. And just the experience I've had of eating different dragon fruit, I know for a fact there's things I would pay $8 a pound for, and there's things I wouldn't even pay the 99 cents for.
Yes, I agree.
And so I think as dragon fruit farmers, we have a responsibility to ourselves, we have a responsibility to the consumers, and we have a responsibility to each other to both keep our quality up and give consumers a way to identify that quality, whether that's a California grown brand or co-op or something like that, whether that's a federal marketing order that gives us an opportunity to sort of supply a certain amount each year as a commodity with a certain standard, right? There's a California standard for citrus, and you don't get to export citrus to other countries and label it as California citrus unless it meets a certain standard. So and that's a ratio of bricks to acid. Okay. And so if you can create a bar that's required for branding, right? So you have a marketing order and that creates a bar required for branding, you may grow 200, you may have 200,000 pounds or 20 tons of fruit on the market today. But if it doesn't meet that bricks to acid ratio, you can't brand that as California fruit because California fruit means something. Yeah. And so I think California dragon fruit should mean something.
So you think the biggest problem is that California lacks a standard for dragon fruit where we can raise the bar, and also that would also affect the standard of imported dragon fruit too.
I don't know if I would say biggest problem. Okay. I would say it's one potential solution to a big problem. A big problem is consumers don't know what they're going to get when they buy a piece of dragon fruit. They don't know where it's from. They don't know why they should care where it's from. They don't know what type of dragon fruit is good. I mean, I think they have like
red skinned or red flesh when it says
red, red, white, purple, or red, purple, and that's it. And then people call reds purple, and then people talk about magenta, and all that stuff is a bit too much for the consumer. What the consumer wants to know is, where do I need to go, and what do I need to look for to know that the piece of fruit is good? Yeah,
so it's like a quality assurance.
Yeah. So it's not quality assurance in terms of like the guy who's putting the stickers on things, right? It's an actual assurance. If I'm going to spend $8 a pound on a piece of fruit, or if I'm going to spend $5 a pound on a piece of fruit, or if I'm going to spend $20 a pound on a piece of fruit, I want to know that that's worth the dollars that I pay. And it is essential as dragon fruit growers, which, I'm experimenting, but I'd like to count myself in that number eventually, if not very soon.
I think you're there, bro. You're a grower.
What I want to know is that I have a customer who knows what they're going to get when they buy from me. Yeah. And I couldn't possibly overstate the importance of it. I could try, but I wouldn't get there. So I think like I want to sit here and like look at Scott over here and challenge like the crew and just be like, hey guys, like we need to care about our quality, and we have to find a way to communicate that and differentiate ourselves, because California has always had the best world climate for growing fruit. We have the best of everything. Mm-hmm. We've got great sunshine. We can harvest more sunshine than anybody else. We have great weather. We have the longest growing seasons out of anywhere. Well, I mean, they could have slightly longer at the equator, but they also have that high humidity that causes problems, mm-hmm. right? We've got that dry heat.
And more pathogens they have too.
And they have more pathogens. And I've even noticed in here, like we were talking about earlier, I get my humidity up too high for a short amount of time and diseases start going crazy. So we have that dry that we can use to control our own humidity, either through misters or for dripping. We have so many advantages over other areas that grow this fruit. Now, we have some disadvantages too. It's not cheap to get labor in California, you know? So that's something we're gonna have to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Some of the cold snaps we get
could affect it. So we have to have frost mitigation. But, you know, as an old hat citrus farmer in general, we've been through cold snaps. We've survived them. We have a lot of strategies. There's ice encapsulation. You get the ground wet and it radiates heat. We have wind machines on every plot that we've got anywhere. And then we also we'll also just get the foliar. You get the vegetation wet as well. Mm-hmm. And what'll happen is as ice forms, it'll suck. It sucks. It basically releases heat off into the plant as the ice forms, because it sucks the cold. In effect, you know, it's sucking the cold out of the plant and putting it into the ice.
Like a capsule.
And then once it's encapsulated, it can't get colder than 32 degrees. So if your plant can handle 32 degrees for a period of time, once it's encapsulated in ice, everything that's covered by the ice can't get colder than that. It's just not possible.
Even what we're in right now, it's never going to get 30 below freezing in this situation,
well,
right?
Yeah, I mean, we get even in the coldest times of the year, we're getting 10 to 12 degrees of passive heat from this. Okay. And then you could add a heater to it if you really needed to. Now, I don't think all my plantings will be this fancy. This was an experiment that was going a different direction that was unsuccessful. Again, you know, that's why they call it research, right? Yeah. It just doesn't always work out how you wanted it to work out.
But you're repurposing this.
But that's another advantage of being flexible. Is I've you know, not only do I have this beautiful area where I can grow through the winter and get, you know, half a year ahead of where I would be, but it's also an opportunity. I was able to reuse a lot of my infrastructure in here. So this trellis, I wouldn't talk a lot about this trellis because this is just our get us through this experiment pilot, right? Trellis. Yeah. But we, you know, because of our citrus program, we have a lot of experience with trellises as well. And my dad's worked with table grapes a lot as well.
And I could see you guys using creating a new trellis, but I mean, just the discussion we had about trellising citrus is mind-blowing about the production you can get. So imagine what you guys could do with just maybe improving a trellis design.
Well, yeah, and then, you know, maybe we need a multiple tiered system, because I've noticed, man, I got a voracious appetite for dragon fruit knowledge. And I just eating it up, and I'm watching all these videos, and that's how we met. Yep. I think I just cold called this guy. I was like, hey, if I pay you money, will you tell me about dragon fruit? And this guy's like, nah, I won't do that, but I'll tell you about dragon fruit anyways.
Yeah, I refuse to.
Weirdo who hates money. I don't know what's going on with that.
I love dragon fruit. That's it. I just want to help him. I think if this is successful, I think more people will enjoy the fruit and just understand our passion, because, I mean, once you have a good dragon fruit, you understand its potential. And so I think we need more people like Tim to really support the community and go from backyard growers to commercial farmed American Beauty, or things that are just Guatemalans or things like that. Some other things I'm really excited about is we have some Diego's Desert King, and I'm really excited to see how it grows in this environment, because that can potentially be an early season fruit. I was calling it a winter season fruit like they do in Israel, but in other words, that fruit could be ripe really early in the season in like February, March, April. So just imagine having a lot of beautiful Desert King style fruit that are Megalanthus, red flesh, red skin, sweet, just a delicious fruit. Imagine having that in stores. I think I could see that being a good future. So this type of person, this type of research, the passion, I think, will all combine to a better dragon fruit future. So that's kind of where we are right now, I guess.
So you say research. We were supposed to at some point talk about. I mean, I'm an experimenter at heart, right? And I get that from my dad. He's the guy who brought the Tatera trellis, the V-shaped trellis you see for citrus, to the United States.
He's the first one to do it, right?
First one in the United States.
Yeah,
they did it in Australia. Yeah. They've done it in Australia and Israel, I think, before here, but first in the United States. And versus other people's sumo groves, he can double production with that trellis. Without him, I think he was maybe 10 or 15 bins to an acre, which is like 40% higher than other people. But with the trellis, our best trellis block is doubling anybody besides our own best conventional block for production these days. I did an experiment in here because I can't use all this beautiful space without learning something. So I've got 4 different rows. I have this row is all planted in a berm, and your berms won't be this fancy if you ever plant them, but I had to find a way to keep my nice DG pad here differentiated because I put, this is actually weed cloth.
That's weed cloth. Okay.
Yeah. So, and you'll see, if we looked down there, you'd see wire cloth. The berm we built for the sumos over there was actually made with wire cloth.
Okay.
But then we were trying for cheap, we're always trying to save $1. If you're not trying to save $1, I'm not sure you're a farmer. And so what we ran into is we don't want all this dirt to come out over time, and we're going to deal with that over there with the mounds, where that dirt's going to cover our pad, and this nice expensive DG pad that's a good place to walk and move through and all that stuff is going to get covered in dirt. So we put this in just as a way to hold that in. I think it might be beneficial.
It could also add more heat to the soil.
It heats the soil up faster. Yep. So on a cold night, our berm is heating up a lot faster where we've got this. So that's good. We're seeing great growth. I mean, look, just zoom up there. All of these.
Look at that. Every branch is just
every
healthy,
one of
beautiful.
These branches came out since early November. Wow. So this is all growth since early November up here.
Off-season growth.
Yeah, and I'll probably need to tip some of these and turn them into cuttings, because if you're talking about airflow going through here, I'm a little crowded.
Yeah, probably top that one.
Tip this guy and maybe one of these other ones over here. Anyways, we'll deal with that later. But again, if you look at my mark here, right? This is where we were in late October, early September.
Yeah.
I know what comes
September.
after October. And then it's come up. I tipped it. It took a long time to throw. Some of these, one thing maybe I should ask you about that at some point, but some of these, when I tipped them, if I didn't tip them right at the top, like the ones that I cut right off at the top, they tended to throw fast. But if I tipped it, if this was up to here and I wanted to get the cutting out of it, so I cut it back, it seems to take a longer time to throw. Is that a consistent thing?
I think it is, because there's more nodes that are active at the top. And so when you cut below it, it now needs to form those nodes. I don't know. I do notice the same thing.
Because in citrus, we notice the tree develops. I don't know enough about the physiology to know where it develops it, but it definitely either develops or sends growth hormone to different parts, and you get apical dominance, and that apical dominance takes over, and that's all based in hormones.
Okay.
So if you were to take the leaves off the tip of the tree, it would have a different set of hormones than the leaves down here at the base of the tree.
That makes sense.
So I'm wondering if there's growth hormone up here, and so when you cut back down here, you're actually losing all your growth hormone.
Yeah, because it's
and putting it into the
there.
cutting, and that's why that cutting shoots off like crazy.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I'm curious if there's not something about the profile of this thing that's putting the growth hormone up in the tip so that it'll stretch.
But there's some people in the Philippines that are adding a hormone to a node, and they can get it to flower off season.
Oh, that's cool.
So they're using this really weird hormone. They put it right on the node, and they could get a flower bud at any time.
That's cool. So of course, we'll walk it back in, because you're as distractible as I am.
Yes.
I've got the berm. I've got these pots. Now, this was my ode. I don't know how much time you spend watching all things dragon fruit on YouTube, but I was watching a couple videos by, I think his name's Gray Martin. He's got a lot of dragon fruit videos, and he was planting in pots. And so I said, why would I take your word for it? I've got to try it myself. So this pot has no bottom. All these pots have no bottom. These are actually just a shell. You're supposed to put a basket inside this, but I just used it as a bottomless pot. So I've got a 20-gallon pot. I've got two 10-gallon pots. I've got two 5-gallon pots. I've got two 1-gallon pots. I've got these, both the white and the black version of this pot, and the white is so that it doesn't absorb as much sunlight. I've got citrus pots, just like you'd use in a citrus nursery, and I just cut the bottom out of those. And all these experiments are, I see a lot of people planting in pots half in the ground, so I've got a pot half in the ground down there. And I want to know, what's the actual best way? Is it planting it flat in the ground, like all the way over there?
Or you can have your mound style here.
Well, so this mound style. So another thing about these is they're sensitive to overwatering, right? You don't want to flood them out.
This is a good strategy, I think.
Now, if you're getting, if you're planting in a rainy area and you can't drain your soil, and then with citrus, wet and cold together, that's not good, because the citrus drinks the water up when it's hot, but it doesn't drink anything up when it's cold. So we plant our citrus in berms, partly because when the whole ground stays wet, we can keep that berm drained. And so that's also have seen a lot of people in other countries planting in mounds like this, especially in extra rainy areas.
Yep.
So if I want to, down the line, have the capacity to put only the amount of water and fertilizer on anytime I want, part of what I need for that is the ability to drain it out when I'm not using it. So if I'm going to be maybe watering these things every single day, but a little bit less than I would water them otherwise, I'll be using less water. I'll be getting a more efficient fertilizer onto them.
Yep.
And I'm going to be keeping them with enough oxygen that the roots never go anaerobic.
And they won't be just stuck in water. They're always going to be above.
Yeah, they're always going to be
floods.
Some water, but only enough water that they can drink and not too much. So these ones are planted in the ground.
Straight in the ground.
Right in the ground.
So I made a special soil mix for this. We bought a load of clean sand, screened sand.
Okay.
And we've got this really beautiful mix of like a sort of a sandy loam and then really thick Porterville clay.
Oh, you saw some clay, huh? So
we took that Porterville clay with a little bit of loam mix just from down here where we pulled that berm out front. And we took that, so the regular dirt from around here, just our native dirt. And then we took 2 scoops of dirt to 1 scoop of dairy screenings. And dairy screenings is just denitrogenated cow scat.
Manure, right?
Yeah, okay. Cow manure. So they put it in a fermentation pond, and they bubble all the nitrogen out of it, and they extract that, and they sell that as fertilizer. Okay. And then when they're done, they have to dredge those things out. And it's just really fine, really easy to not digest, decompose organic matter. And so we add like 100 tons of that per acre.
So it's nice organic matter that's not high in nitrogen.
Yeah. Okay. It actually shouldn't have any nitrogen in it anymore. I mean, it's got some, but
it has trace amounts.
It's not. You wouldn't see a percentage if you bought it in a bag. You know, it wouldn't be a tested percentage. So it's just pure organic matter, no nutrients, more or less, and then 2 parts dirt. So 2 parts dirt, 1 part that organic matter, and then we did 1 part sand as well, which is a little different than what we do for citrus. But I really wanted these things to be able to drain.
Yeah, and you can see how healthy they are. Every method, I don't see a sick plant.
Yeah, and we actually, in addition to that, I believe we put in a 1/2 scoop. We had, you'll see these chunks of citrus here. We had taken out a bunch of trees recently and put them through a wood chipper. So we just put 1/2 scoop of our own native wood chips from our citrus trees in here, just to give something to break up the soil even more and give it more drainage pathways and a little more open capillaries.
And it's working well for you, huh?
It's doing good so far. I would say I don't feel bad about the stuff planted in the ground, but I don't feel as good about it if you look at the ones in the mound and in the ground.
I feel like the mound...
got some real big ones over there.
I would agree. It feels like the mound method or the berm method seem to have good potential. Now, which one's more effort or work?
Well, so for planting an individual tree or an individual plant,
the mound would be easy.
The mound is actually a little bit harder than the berm, because you've got to build that mound up. So you basically dig a little hole, there's two ways. There's two methods that we tried. You dig a little hole and set that thing in the little hole, and then just mound up around it, or you build the mound first and then plant into the mound. But either way, you're building the mound up for each tree you plant.
Yes.
Whereas the berm in the greenhouse, that was a lot of effort, and we had to build structure for it, and that's literally just our own neurosis. You wouldn't ever do that in a field. They have a piece for a tractor that's two blades,
right? Okay.
Yeah, and then you might pull 8 berms. You get a big one of those big John Deeres with the 4 sets of tires, and or a tracked cat or something, and you pull 8 berms at a time going through the field. So if you're at a larger scale, pulling a berm is a lot less effort than building all these mounds. And then when you plant, it's super easy to plant in that berm. Well, because it's all loose and it's all highly draining soil.
So if you don't see much of a difference, it's a no-brainer to do a berm to expand your planting.
Well, and the other thing that I would work on is I'm probably going to go higher density than this in the field, provided I can get enough cuttings for my first planting. And the thing that higher density will do is, if you had mounds, it would turn into a berm anyways. You know, if I had 2 trees in between here, this would be a berm on accident. But imagine now, look at these two. Let's say I just did plant at 6 feet like I'm planted here. This is a 6x6 planting.
Okay.
So I did 6x6, but I offset by 3 feet, so that where this is coming over, that one's offset and then coming over.
This is offset here, Scott. See, so this one's right in the center of this other row here. So that's a really smart idea.
So that's basically just, I can get the same density but still have more walkway.
Yep.
Now, if you look at where the roots want to be in here, these roots want to be near the surface because this water comes down, and you can actually see the pattern of where the water went to.
Yep.
All the way around. But I've got good topsoil root zone, you know, that top 8 to 10 inches, really down to 18 inches. I've got that from here to here.
Yep.
And then anything more than that is going to be using more effort to pull all that water up. Now, if you look over at the berm, I've got all this area for top roots to go into where they can get the easy water.
Yep.
So I think in the long run, the berm is going to be way better because I can build a root zone that just comes out along this whole thing over here.
Constant 8-inch root zone or whatever.
And it's constant and it's shallow, and I can unplug this dripper here and add another octopus in and then just spread it out, right? So as soon as these grow bigger, I'll be basically using those stakes. I've got these, this is just a farming method thing, but I've got these stakes these are 1 gallon drippers, so each of these stakes are roughly a quarter of a gallon. And then I can move them into different locations. So say now this is officially rooted better, I might want to build out my root ball down to here more. Mm-hmm. So I can move those around and actually affect how the tree or the plant grows. Sorry, I'm a citrus farmer. I'm going to say tree until the day I die. It's just the way it's going to go. Plant into the plant material. No. But it gives me the flexibility to punch in another dripper and then just put more things and keep that root base going out the direction
it's going. As your plant gets 300 pounds.
Well, and I don't necessarily need a wide root base when I've got a single stalk growing up, but it'd be nice to add it later. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of strategy stuff that comes into this, and just lessons learned from how much we've messed up on citrus stuff. But these plants look really promising. I mean, all of this stuff out here all came from an 8-inch tall cutting in May of this year, and it's what, December right now?
And most of them are taller than me. So, I mean,
well, of course, as you stand by, like the smallest.
That's okay.
It's honestly, it's a Valdivia Roja. It's not that important.
So, I mean, to me, I was so impressed when I came in here yesterday. I probably didn't tell you, just because I expected to see plants 3 or 4 feet because of the short duration you've had them. Yet, I'm very pleasantly surprised to see you're having plants taller than me and epiphytic roots already binding to the...
Well, that was one thing. So, back to their origin story, I actually got my wife, her name is Tal, I got Tal's parents to come and advise me on what to do with the dragon fruit when they saw my stuff.
Really?
And so they gave me some input. The best input they gave me was move it out from underneath the eucalyptus tree.
Yep.
Because the eucalyptus drops oils, and they said don't put it under the oak tree either. So what I did that really kicked these things off, and I mean like crazy growing season, was I moved them we have a dog run, or like a 2 kennels and then a run area around it. And I stretched some 30% shade cloth over the growing area because it was 100 degrees every day and I didn't want them to get sunburned. So I stretched that shade cloth over, and then I put all these things in, and they were probably 2.5 feet tall, and 90% of them doubled their height in 2 months.
Wow.
Like it was
just sitting in a nice hot spot with 30% shade cloth.
Sun all day, but never direct sun.
Yep.
And they just, and then that's when I got cuttings. So bear in mind, all these cuttings came at 8 inches. You know, they sell 8 or 8 plus, you know, like 5 to 8 or bigger than 8. So I got all bigger than 8s.
But they're 8 to 12, maybe, right? I mean,
there wasn't a 12 among them. Okay. They were 8 to 10-ish.
8 to 9.
Yeah, 8 to 9. That's a good description. So, what happened is, as those things exploded, I started outgrowing my stakes. I was on these little orange stakes.
Oh.
And so I started taking cuttings of them. You'll see some.
Like this stake. Look at this.
Yeah, well,
maximum capacity.
I tied them together. Now I've got the 8-foot stakes, the real big ones, that I'm going here. But you'll see a lot of these.
So look at this one. This is literally the oldest it could be is from May.
Yeah,
and it's like 9 feet tall.
Yeah, that's is that a
That
Laverne?
is Laverne.
Oh man, Laverne's, Haley's Comets, Delights, PGs, and Zamorano's. Just
They were growing really well.
They grow crazy here. What's this guy? This is San Ignacio's too, but who cares?
Hey, they taste good sometimes.
These things were growing up so big that they were breaking off. Here's an example. Like, this just straight up broke off. Because it was so long.
It just
snapped. And so I was having that problem a little bit. So I started taking some cuttings from those. And then if you come over here, some of these are some of the material I bought from you. But all of these university ones here, like this guy. Oh, here's an example of one that broke off and I just planted it. All these guys here, all the ones in these 1-gallon pots, these are all cuttings from plants I bought in May. Every one of these ones that's taller than me here. So, including growing as big as all these ones out here, they also gave me all. I've gotten, I think I started with 143 plants, and I now in my nursery from those plants have like 87 cuttings. Some of which are already also taller than me. So they're growing like gangbusters around here.
Yeah, whatever your strategy is, just starting this first trial is really paying off, in my opinion. I mean, look at this.
I've not used any rooting hormones. I've used your potting mix.
Okay.
I've used what's called a UC mix, which is 1/3 sand, 1/3 humus, and 1/3 peat moss. And then I used some of that top pot because I wanted to compare your potting mix to top pot and see which one was gonna do better for me. I'd say your potting mix provided the most shoot growth.
Okay.
The UC potting mix provided the most root growth.
That's important too.
And the top pot, it was fine. It didn't bother me, but it just didn't perform quite the same as yours. Although I will say, your addition of the coconut core is consistent with what I've seen about the humus in the UC mix. Because where there's chunks of woody stuff, those roots just suck around it and then explode out.
Yep.
And they almost get they go radial when they run into that. So I actually noticed that bit of radial sort of attitude. So actually at this point,
and that's a good thing as a farmer, right? You want to see that.
You want to see the roots just go nuts because so if I've got a long root, I've got to come all this way up the highway, right?
Yep.
But everything that's out of it, if I've got a bunch of roots coming out here and then this long root, I'm actually just using my arterial street to get onto the highway, and then I'm increasing the speed of that highway because all that's got to go through there now. Okay. So I actually want spider web, thousands of little tiny roots in every direction. The closer the root is to the shoot, the less effort the plant has to use. Like if you imagine sucking through a straw, let's imagine you had a 24-inch tall, because that's maybe how deep your roots go, 24-inch tall cup. When you suck on a straw, your hydraulic pressure from the weight of the liquid is actually pushing down into the top of that straw. So you're only sucking from the top of the
it's very minimal effort.
The top of however full the water is to you. So it's less distance to travel.
So it's closer
through the straw, and so the more diverse, the more top roots I have, the less effort I'm ever going to be spending to move my nutrients up into the plant. And so it's just, I mean, it's been a blessing. Like it's just nuts because there's 1,000 things to learn. There's 1,000 things that cross over from other farming experience. I mean, I've never had a citrus tree that I could just chop in half and throw on the ground.
Yep.
And it would grow. So that's kind of cool experience, you know. But it's also just been like, man, like I learned don't ever root something when it's cold. Mm-hmm. And I'll show you these guys. These guys, that's my theory at least.
I mean,
all
you've
of
only
these
been doing this 7 months, and look at the amount of plant material you have.
All of these were rooted when it's cold. So if I pull on this, it's not. You're not
this
looking
guy's
like
rooting,
it.
though. This one did.
So this one's rooted, but this guy,
he's got a little bit.
He's just barely starting to come.
Yeah,
no, that was a piece of wood. See, so I'm trying to cheat and get the best of both worlds. I mixed that UC mix 50-50 with the potting soil that I made on your bonus because I really like how yours drains. I think it's probably the best soil. But man, I got so excited by the crazy root growth I was getting in there, so I've been mixing a little bit in and cheating my way through. But
so do you think the humus is helpful? Because Paul Thompson talks about using that as his media for dragon fruit as well. Or he did talk about it.
Well, so I think you're right, and I especially think Gary's right about potting soil. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to grow these in a pot. I don't want a potted plant in my house.
Yep.
And so if you're talking about potting soil, yes, you want it to be more inert, and you want to add the nutrients in yourself. You don't want those nutrients to become from something biodegrading.
Yes.
Because what will happen is eventually you're going to reach some equilibrium where it's not biodegrading anymore. You're going to get oxygen stale, and you're going to go anaerobic, and you're going to get root rot. Whereas in the ground, water's always moving through it, sun's always coming down on it. There's a lot more going on in there. And so I think you have to treat the ground differently than you would treat a pot. You don't get as hot in the ground as you'd get in a pot. Because that pot gets in the sun and it heats up, and all that stuff's baking in there, and it's even changing the profile of the soil because it's baking it so much. And it, another experiment we've done in here, we tried to put some citrus trees in pots, and they baked. It was like putting them in the oven. We'd have huge amounts of good roots, and it just didn't match the temperature of the top of the tree, and so it just baked the tree up.
I mean, it just failed in the long term.
It failed in the short term too. We're successful, man. We can really go for it when we want to.
Yeah,
we can fail quickly and often.
I would love to grow in this setup, but my problem is gophers. So when I have to grow in pots, it's because we have so many gophers that just they come in from all the neighbors' yards, and so it's impossible for me to keep dragon fruit growing alive in the ground. And that's why I'm using pots.
Now, have you experimented at all with like the Kevin style pots where you drill a bunch of small holes in it?
I am drilling a lot of holes in my pots, and that I think improves my dragon fruit. I think it's a better thing. But I agree with you. Like if I could do another plot in my yard, I may just invest more money and do something like this berm.
Well, this actually, if gophers is your poison, this berm actually might be.
So this could be a new method.
Very successful, right? Because you could, if you needed to. I mean, I don't know if a gopher will go through weed cloth or not.
Well, I can use metal instead, right?
We've actually got. Yeah, you could use wire cloth. We've actually got a bottom piece to this. This isn't just the sides. So this basket here, and you may just get. I'll give you a website. This is a gabion wall.
Okay.
We bought gabion wall and just used 3 sides of it.
Okay.
And so you can get smaller holes on it too, I believe.
So
or
if I
we
can
just
make
attach wire cloth to it.
Gopher proof, this would probably be a much better thing than pots.
So your roots can still go through things gophers can't go through and get out, and the gophers can eat what they want of it, but they can't get to your main root system. And I think a berm or an alternate to this that you might try is a trough.
Okay.
We have some citrus trees over there and those long air pots they call them hedge pots. Mm-hmm. And I've been loving those things, man. Those things air the soil up, they keep it real, they let it dry out really well. lots of oxygen gets in there, and they're self-pruning. So you don't root bound. The roots grow out to the edge of the air pots and then die, and then it channels that growth to somewhere else instead of just spinning around in the pot and keep growing.
Thing too?
I think those air pots will be a great idea for people that have to grow in pots.
Okay.
You just have to put, like they have that wire mesh that you put in like light concrete applications, like 1/2 or 1/4 inch holes. Put that across the bottom of the hedge pot so the gopher can't come up through it.
Yep.
Yeah. But then try those hedge pots.
Okay.
I've had great success with those on other applications.
Yeah, I was looking at them on your citrus, and they seem to work really well.
And then this is probably not commercially viable, but it's close to my heart. I have my father-in-law's named Cat, so I have 3 varieties. I call them Cat R1 for Cat Red 1, Cat White 1, and Cat White 2. And it's a self-fertile red. No idea what variety it is. You can tell me in a couple of years once I'm getting fruit from it. And then I've got self-fertile white, and then a self-fertile white that they say 95+% of the flowers all come to with no, it sets really well, with no hand pollination at all. They'll get 95% self-fertile and isn't there another term?
Self-pollinating.
Self-pollinating and self-fertile, so they don't touch it, and 95% of the flowers grow.
It just grows and will set fruit on its own pretty much.
And it's decent fruit, but it's like you gotta eat it. You gotta eat it off the tree. Like you gotta let it ripen all the way. You know, some fruit you can kind of pick it early and stick it in the fridge for a while, and then it turns out good. The whites here that I have, they're kind of, you just gotta pick them ripe and eat them. You know, they're ready to go. Maybe put it in the fridge long enough to cool it down.
Okay.
So that's just fun because it's family and because it's the ones that got me into it.
These are the ones that got you into it, right?
Yeah, no, that's where it all came from. And then I've got some of them rooted faster than others. So I put all these in the small pots. Oh, that's another thing that I've been doing, and I don't have any idea if it's a good idea or not.
Small pots?
But I start really small.
Yep.
I start small in these little guys, and as soon as basically what I do is I squeeze the sides and I push, and if the whole thing comes out together and there's roots poking, see this one I can already tell it's not ready because it's the root ball's falling apart.
This one's ready.
Right? So there's just a little bit of root poking out there. I like it so that when I pull this out, it doesn't fall apart.
Yep.
As soon as I can pull this out and it doesn't fall apart, then I'm ready to go to the next size, which I do in these citrus pots. These things are amazing. One, they're really easy to manage because I can put 8, and the soil's super light, as long as I haven't watered recently.
And so I can stand.
So they're on a stand, so they're not falling over. I can transplant straight into there. It's got lots of aeration. There's these holes. All these are drain holes on the bottom, so you can't overwater it. And with that, between the light soil and the extra drain holes on these things, I get great results rooting these. And before I had these, I was putting them into the 1-gallon pots, and they like those. But I think this is really the way to go for ease of management, especially on a commercial scale.
Start small as well. I've been experimenting. It's funny you did this because I've been using Starbucks cups. So I'm trying to see, is a 1-gallon pot or a Starbucks cup, is there a difference? So
far as I can tell, these little rooting trays, I'm actually reusing all the ones that, these are what the university ones came in. So I've been reusing them, you know, you wash the pot out. You don't want to transfer any disease through it. You sterilize it with a little peroxide if you'd like to. And then I just plant straight back into it. And I've used these particular ones probably 5 or 6 times already.
Wow.
Just because I'm getting so many cuttings, and then my father-in-law brought me a ton of cuttings, and then I bought a bunch of cuttings from you. And so it's just been, there's been a lot of learning. There's been a lot of varieties. I think we started with 27 varieties from the university, everything they had in stock. And then you gave me like 10 more varieties. And now you just brought me like 3 more, or 4 more. I got Bruni. Yeah. I'm excited about that.
Well, they're adding. Well, I really appreciate just what you've been willing to share so far. And I can't wait to see what you do next season, because I think people like you and your passion, your methods, I think are really going to promote this plant in the future. So thanks for what you do.
Well, I hope so. And then, you know, at the same time that I'm excited to get involved, man, I also got to put that challenge out there, man. Like we as dragon fruit growers, man, we have the opportunity to really mess this thing up permanently.
Yep.
So it's time to get together. It's time to think about yourself by thinking about other people, and really get out there and think, what can we do as a group that's going to be good for this industry, that's going to keep me in a position where I can still be growing in 20 years and you can still be growing in 20 years.
Yep. All right. Give us a like and a subscribe. Thanks for letting us do this tour. I really appreciate you sharing all this.
There's one thing.
Uh-oh.
Smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell.
I've
always wanted to say that.
There you go. I'm bad at saying that.
You have to smash it. The subscribe button, you got to smash it.
Yep.
And then you got to ring that notification
You got to
bell.
say dragon fruit.